Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show chess grandmaster Michael Adams. He became a grandmaster at the age of 17. Mickey, a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So give us a little background of how you really got into the world of professional chess.
Well, I probably turned professional around the same time I became a grandmaster, a little bit before, around the age of 17, because it just seemed a very tempting thing to do at the time, really. Instead of carrying on with my studies, to be able to go around the world, traveling to different countries, playing chess, it wasn't really much of a choice at the time.
So is there a big movement of young people who decide to simply become competitive chess players?
Well, the game's gotten even younger since then, really. I mean, at that time, I think I was the youngest grandmaster in the world at the age of 17, and that record has been pushed down. I think something to the age of 12. Something is now the record for the youngest grandmaster. So, in fact, people are specialising in chess even younger and are often homeschooled or don't really spend a lot of time on their studies, because it is a very time-intensive thing, chess. With modern computers and databases that are essential for training, it takes quite a lot of time, and if players are identified young as talented players, they can specialise in chess quite young.
Okay, so let's focus a little more on this, because actually on the Goldstein on Gelt show, I've had the honor to speak with many chess players, not the least of which is who I mention all the time, Susan Polgar. She and I are working on a book together about to come out called Rich as a King, How the Wisdom of Chess Can be Applied to Investing. So tell me a little bit about what it takes to be a grandmaster. Tell me about your day and how you do training, because I'd like to learn from you, and maybe some of those same tools and tactics that you use, people could use in many fields.
I think in chess, and probably a lot of other things, it's quite important to think independently and be trying to move things forward. In chess at the moment, there's a huge amount of information. There's basically information overload. There's thousands of top-level games being played, downloaded to the database each week, and there's already many millions of known games in the database. And in any position, you can run the computer. The computer will give you advice on the assessment of the position, how best play goes. But there's just too much information out there, really. You need to kind of narrow down ideas, and also to find ideas that are really practical over the board. What may work for the computer, it doesn't necessarily work well for a human.
Can you explain that a little bit? That would seem to me that...
Well, you really want to put your opponent under pressure at the board, and to do that you nearly always need to find a new idea. If you're repeating moves that have been played before, it's very, very likely that he will know it. Occasionally you can catch someone like this, but really you're talking about their 5% of the time or less. You need to kind of set him a new problem, which at home when he's studying with unlimited time and no pressure may not create many problems for him. But over the board with the clock ticking and the unpleasant sensation that you've analysed this before, that's really the way to kind of get the initiative in the opening. And it might be more than one move. It might be an idea or a plan that you're looking to implement in the position. It may not be a question of one move. It might be a kind of you've gone much deeper into the ideas, and it might also be against your opponent's style of play. If you think he's a very aggressive, sharp player who likes tactical positions, you might just go to a quiet position and think he can get frustrated there. Or if you think he's more at home in quiet positions, you might try and play something very sharp. So there's lots of different angles that you can take.
Okay. We're talking with Michael Adams, Mickey Adams. You may also know him if you are in England and you read the Saturday Telegraph Weekend section, where his chess column has been appearing since 2006. He was the world's youngest grandmaster in his day, but of course, as Mickey was telling us, people have gotten a little bit younger and younger and gotten higher and higher scores in terms of their rating at a younger age. And Mickey, I want to dive into something you were talking about, which is you mentioned the term information overload, and also the importance of thinking independently. And this is something that I see on Wall Street when I work with people in terms of financial plans or investing. Oftentimes they'll say, there's so much out there, and how do you make a decision? How can you actually, at some point you have to pull the trigger and move your piece or move your money? What do you advise, or how do you yourself separate this huge amount of information that's available from actual day-to-day tactics and making a move?
Well, I think you have to know yourself. That's very important, and to know what positions suit you best. That's the other thing. I talked a bit about how you might try and make your opponent uncomfortable, but you also need to know the kind of positions that you're aiming for and be honest with yourself. And I think then you'll automatically be drawn to ideas. And, you can sometimes check ideas a bit. Sometimes you might have like a training session with another strong opponent. You might try some ideas that you intended to try in tournaments in a few, perhaps quicker time limit games, and just to see how it goes in a training game, because when you're playing an opponent, see how they respond in the training game might give you an idea of whether the idea is viable or not, and you get some feedback from them before you unleash it in a tournament game.
I think that's a fabulous answer you gave, and it's so amazing to me that even the terms you're using are terms that we use in the world of money. You said you have to know yourself. You have to know what suits you best. And I get this a lot. People call up and they say, hey, Doug, what stock should I buy, or what fund should I put my money in? And I'll turn around and ask them, well, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And I think a lot of times people are frustrated with that answer because they just want, in today's day and age, a tweet that tells them how they can become a millionaire. But I guess really what you're saying is that you have to figure out who you are and build a strategy around your own personality. Is that a good description?
Well, one thing in chess, I think, is that a lot of people will say, can I get coaching? Is that the answer in chess if I get coaching? And there's no doubt coaching could be very helpful in many ways. But there is an issue that when you're playing chess, you're there on your own. At the board, there'll be no one to help you then. So a coach can help you in some ways, of course, but he can only take you so far. It's got to come from you. The ideas have to come from you. You're the one who will have to respond in a crisis. And that's the difficult thing about chess, because normally when you get into problems in a crisis, you tend to go back to making typical mistakes. And that's a difficult thing, of course. But okay, in chess, the key is really to avoid difficult situations in general. Of course, chess is a game which is played against the clock to a large degree. You only get a certain amount of time to make your moves. So that's a kind of difficult thing as well. In a way, a top tournament where you might be playing 9 games in 10 days or something, it's like having perhaps having 9 really critical exams over 10 days. And in between, of course, you're preparing for the games, which is a bit similar to revising. So that's sort of the thing. It's quite a tense, and it takes a lot of energy participating in a tournament.
And I think what you said is that people often fall back to their bad habits, or when it gets too stressful, they don't think as clearly. How would you suggest someone deal with that problem? Because it's true across the board. If you were coaching a chess player, what would you say to make sure he doesn't do that?
I think it's very hard to really eradicate. I think when I play chess, I think it's very important to try and apportion your time correctly, and to not get sucked into using up too much of your time early in the game. So then you always have some kind of time available. I think it's very easy in chess to think that the decisions that you make early on are going to be incredibly critical, and that they're really important, and you can justify spending the extra time. But there will always be more decisions to be made later. A chess game is all about decisions, and so is life or investing in a number of other areas. So I think when you've looked at something, you've made a decision, you just have to go with it. And if you feel that you've taken as much time or made that decision as responsibly as you can, then that's the way it is, and you have to live with it.
And I think the idea of not wasting your time in the beginning the way you can really learn to do that is just to learn the openings, because there is a history there that people who really want to get involved can spend the time learning it, and then they don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, and only later in the game is when the real deep decision making, I guess, comes into play.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's also noticeable a lot of the very top players in the world will often try and pressurize their opponents on the clock by playing very fast themselves to put even more pressure on their opponents. They may not do it in every game or, even throughout the game, but there may come a moment when they suddenly just bash out several quick moves. And that's quite an unpleasant thing. Also, psychologically,
sure.
It has quite a big effect. Just suddenly in a position that may seem to you very complicated, to them, suddenly they make 3 or 4 very quick, good moves. It can have quite an effect.
Yeah, and I think also, as we wrap up, I just want to focus on this one point, which I think is great, is that if you waste time in the beginning, in the same way we see it all the time when people start out in their working career, they don't even begin to think about savings or retirement, and then at the end they're in this huge rush to try and build up a savings plan so that they can afford some kind of retirement, and then it goes back to what we said before, which is they fall back to bad habits. They take risks that are too big, or they just make very poor decisions. But if you can pace yourself, and especially when you're young or at the beginning of a chess game, don't let the clock tick away on you. Just follow the rules that people know work.
Yeah, I suppose in investing it's a bit like chess. That chess is a very difficult game. You can play your whole life. I'm obviously quite a good player, but there's so much about chess I don't know, and so much more that I can research and learn about it, and investing like that as well. That as you go along, there's an unlimited amount of stuff that you can learn, but you want to try and at least build up your knowledge and experience as you go along, so you're at least making progress as time goes by.
Yeah, and I guess that's what keeps us on our toes and keeps our businesses interesting. Mickey Adams, it's really been great talking to you. Tell me in the last few seconds, how can people follow you and follow your work?
Well, I've got a website, michaeladamschess.co.uk. If they want to visit that, then they can see some of my past columns there, and I blog there from time to time, updating on tournaments I've played in. So that would be one way.
Okay, and we will put a link to that at the show notes of goldsteinongelt.com to make it easy for people to find you. Mickey, thanks again so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.